I go by the name Anna. Serving as an editor at one of the prominent publishing firms downtown. Just an ordinary individual. I tend to gravitate towards simplicity. Life has always been a whirlwind. Balancing tight deadlines while trying to carve out some personal time for myself. Perhaps that's why I never quite immersed myself in the dating scene. I found solace in my own company. Often accompanied by a captivating book or a serene stroll in the nearby park. However, everything shifted on an ordinary Saturday suffused with sunshine. Engrossed in a podcast, I meandered through the park, oblivious to my surroundings. The atmosphere was vibrant, teeming with people accompanied by their furry companions and energetic children frolicking around. Amidst my reverie, a cyclist narrowly avoided colliding with me, his abrupt warning piercing through my thoughts. When he squeezed past me at the last second, he yelled out, "Watch it," with an irritated undertone. Quickly realizing I had stumbled into the bike lane, I yanked out one earpiece in a panic. I embarrassedly admitted my error and shouted out, "I'm really sorry." I brushed a stray hair from my face with a rueful smile, my cheeks red with shame. Instead of being angry, the rider, whose name was Tom, turned to face me, his eyes sparkling with amusement. He made the comment, "You really need to watch where you're going," with him sounding less serious. "This path can be a jungle sometimes." I totally agree. It's all my fault, I admitted with a twinge of embarrassment. Nevertheless, the tension that had briefly persisted was alleviated by his laughter. With a handshake, he introduced himself as Tom and told me my name. "And you are?" "Anna," I said, shaking hands with him, in sharp contrast to my nervous disposition. His grasp radiated assurance. He asked me with a playful grin, "So, Anna, are you always this preoccupied? Or is it just my captivating presence?" I couldn't help but laugh when he mocked me. "Just a busy week at work. I'm already thinking about the weekend," I admitted with a hint of shame as I offered a sheepish grin. "Suffice it to say, that little cafe over there," he said, gesturing towards a picturesque place tucked away on the park's edge, where he was headed to get a coffee. "Would you be interested in going with me? Think of it as a gesture of goodwill for coming so close to sending you soaring." I paused to think about it. He seems pleasant enough. And, to be honest, I could really need some coffee. So what? Enthralled by the prospect of a delightful cup of coffee and a captivating tale, I nodded in agreement and crept alongside him. Tom was a natural storyteller when we plodded up the sidewalk to the cafe. He was rather talkative when he told me about his life as a car salesman and how he liked to go cycling and hang out with friends on the weekends. He had come from the countryside, but he had come to the city in search of better prospects. And he had high hopes for the dynamic urban environment. In addition, I discussed my employment and how I was able to transform my love of reading into a successful profession. I'd much rather pursue something I love than be stuck in a soul-draining cubicle, I said to myself. Upon our arrival to the cafe and placement of our coffee orders, I was unexpectedly comfortable in Tom's presence. When I was around him, I felt completely at ease, which is unusual for me when I'm meeting new people. Tom and I started hanging out more after our first meeting. His laid-back demeanor and charm were endearing. but I couldn't help but notice petty annoyances in his behavior. After seeming inconsequential at first, these comments started to make me wonder. While having dinner with friends one Saturday night, the conversation drifted to topics like work and family. "How's the book world treating you? What gives?" Tom asked when he sipped his beer. "As usual. It's relentless." When I poked my salad, I responded, "No one waits for deadlines." "All right. I understand. However, being bound to that indefinitely wouldn't be ideal. Would it? At some point, you might want to relax and cut back on your work hours," he said in a casual tone, which made me stop eating my fork. "I don't think so, Tom. My work fills me with joy. As for me, I'm not planning on quitting anytime soon, if ever," I shot back. With a shrug, he said, "Sure. But how will things change once we start a family? You should try to be more present. Don't you think?" My uncomfortable laughter was a result of how caught off guard I was by his query. "That's jumping way ahead. Don't you think?" The pain persisted despite my best efforts to ignore it. Tom extended an invitation to supper with his parents a fortnight later. I saw that as a sign that things were looking up between us. Having said that, I learned a lot from the dinner. His folks lived in a nice, tidy suburban home. In her enthusiastic greeting, Mrs. Reed conveyed her joy at finally meeting me. Mrs. Reed spent the most of the evening on marriage and family, highlighting the value of women in the home. In search of a response, I stole a quick look at Tom. As Mrs. Reed continued to emphasize family-first values, Tom remained fixated on his meal. When prompted by his mother, he reluctantly nodded in agreement. A blow to my convictions. I maintained composure, asserting my career-oriented stance. Mrs. Reed's response, dripping with saccharine sweetness, implied that my perspective would inevitably shift once children entered the picture. The rest of the night was a blur. We were on our way home shortly after supper, and the tension was noticeable the whole way. I spoke out, breaking the ice, and said, "Your mom has strong opinions about family roles. Do you share the same views?" An uncertain "there's some truth to it" came out of his mouth as his response. My parents had success with it. Our relationship continued even though the dinner was awkward. In the middle of everything, I agreed to marry him, even though I knew there were red flags lurking in the back of my mind. I felt more and more pressure as the wedding day approached. And not just because of the ceremony but also because of the life that would follow. At the reception that followed the wedding, Tom's mom took me away. Her words carried a weight that her smile couldn't hide. "Oh, Anna. I'm really happy for you too. Always keep in mind that a good wife is there for her husband no matter what." Even though her comment seemed more like a warning, I returned her grin. I brought up Tom's mother's expectations about my job and having a family later on when we were alone. Keeping an eye on what's to come is all she's doing. He lightly dismissed the mothers, saying, "You know how they are." He then took a sip of champagne. I stated, "But I'm not planning to give up my job, even when we have kids." While carefully observing his reaction, I insisted, hoping he would understand. Tom hesitated, his countenance somber. It will be seen, Anna. Things evolve. We will prioritize our family's needs. Tom suggested that, after we were married, we moved to a bigger apartment close to his office at the auto sales company. The new property was nice and roomy, but its proximity to his parents' house was the deciding factor. Even though I had my doubts regarding his location choice, I held out optimism for what was to come. But the truth started to sink in when we adjusted to our new existence as a couple. Tom insisted more and more on his idealized picture of a typical nuclear family, in which he would be the earner and I would take care of the house and the kids. Sitting at the dinner table one night, we tried to make sense of our financial future amidst a jumble of budgets and bills. In light of the current economic climate, I made an effort to demonstrate how keeping both of our jobs could offer security. Tom, have a look at these numbers. We aren't merely getting by. We are actively saving thanks to our 2 salaries. As I pointed to the spreadsheet, I argued that it would be foolish for me to resign. The papers were pushed aside when Tom shook his head. You know, Anna, it's not all about the money. Making a genuine family life, similar to the one my parents had, is the main focus. But it's not the past. Tom, I protested, my aggravation escalating as I sighed. A lot has altered. Each of us must make a contribution. Our conversation came to a crushing halt because he was still not convinced. Being so close to his mother, Mrs. Reed, made matters more problematic. Unannounced visits from her came often, and with each one came a fresh attack on my housekeeping abilities. Without warning, she swung in one day and began critiquing the house while I went through work emails. Anna, it would be beneficial for you to prioritize keeping your home tidy more often. A dusty environment is harmful, she admonished sternly, dragging her finger along the bookcase. I clenched my jaw and smiled tight, trying to hide my anger. I cleaned yesterday, Mrs. Reed. We came home to a light dusting while I balanced my full-time employment. She jumped in with, "You're working too much," while she rummaged through the linen cupboard in search of a laundry disaster. Clutching my fists in defense of my time management skills, I trailed following her. I adamantly stated, "Mrs. Reed, both Tom and I are content with our arrangement." Contesting the idea that a woman's only role is to stay at home and mother her family. Every one of her comments stabbed me like a thorn, casting doubt on my convictions. I would not bend to her conventional wisdom. I told Tom that I was unhappy with his mother's critical comments that she made all the time that night. "She means well, Anna," he replied, conflicted between his mother's allegiance and his support for me. The sour mood that our argument brought into our nights persisted. Even though I was her perfect wife, I still felt like an alien in my own house because of how she viewed me. Tom's dissatisfaction escalated as his gripes about the unattended housework became more strident. He implied that he would reevaluate our marriage if I failed to live up to his standards. Faced with the threat of divorce, I agonized over a decision that challenged my independence. Reluctantly, I approached my boss, Ellen, about resigning from my beloved job. She tried to dissuade me, recognizing my value to the company. "Anna, you're indispensable to us. Ellen voiced her concern. Despite her efforts, I saw no alternative. The next day, I made the painful choice to leave my career behind and embrace the role of a full-time homemaker. Acknowledging the strain at home, I confessed my struggles to Ellen, always ready with a solution. She suggested a compromise. Remote work. It seemed like a lifeline. I agreed, opting not to disclose the truth to Tom. Instead, I announced my resignation, which he greeted with elation, believing I had prioritized our home life over my career. Thus, I embarked on my clandestine dual existence. By day, I assumed the role of a dedicated housewife, bidding Tom farewell in the mornings and welcoming him home in the evenings. But in the shadows, I powered up my laptop, delving into my editing projects. It was a peculiar arrangement, but it sustained us. I squirreled away the earnings from my remote job in a covert bank account, just in case. Despite our efforts to tighten our belts, 3 months later, we found ourselves financially strained. Tentatively, I broached the subject with Tom, suggesting a return to work. His reaction was swift and harsh, attributing our financial woes to my spending habits. I was crestfallen. I had scrimped and saved diligently. The following day, his mother arrived on a mission to school me in frugality. Dragging me to the store, she dictated my purchases, advocating for the cheapest options. Back home, she dispensed budgeting advice with a patronizing tone, scrutinizing my every expenditure. Living under their imposed austerity became unbearable. Each day felt more stifling than the last. Trapped in a facade of compliance, I longed for liberation from their surveillance, yearning to reclaim my autonomy. For now, I bided my time, meticulously plotting my next moves. The tension finally reached its breaking point on a damp Tuesday evening. While pouring my heart out to my mom over the phone, I lamented the constant intrusion of Tom's mother into our lives. Her voice, a blend of concern and frustration, urged me to assert boundaries. Just as I nodded, bolstered by my mother's support, Tom burst into the room, his face flushed with anger. He must have overheard my grievances. Ripping the phone from my hand, he berated me for airing our issues like gossip. His boldness astounded me. I spoke up, my voice shaking, about how you couldn't just take my phone and talk to my mom in that way. With each word he spoke, his voice rose in an accusatory tirade. My efforts to persuade him were completely ignored. His anguish was palpable when he said, "Maybe my mom was right." His words cut deep into my soul. I regret getting married to you. My frustration and hurt made me stand firm. I would not give in to his or his mother's manipulation any longer. The tension between us rose, and Tom finally snapped. Behave like my wife or go. I understood then how hopeless our situation was. Complicating matters further, I gathered a few of possessions, including my computer and clothing, and got ready to go. Still, I had no idea how much Tom's last nasty deed hurt. He demanded to know why I should have any right to the money I had worked so hard to get, all the while grabbing my handbag. Without a struggle, I handed over my pocketbook. Having accepted the reality of our irreconcilable differences, Keep it, I replied, my voice betraying my utter disbelief. I couldn't help but marvel how things had crumbled so swiftly when I stepped out into the dark, rain-soaked night. My pulse pounding. I stood by the entrance and flagged down a cab. When I climbed into the taxi, despite the biting cold and the sudden downpour, I felt an odd sense of peace wash over me. I had decided to go. A sense of comfort flooded over me when I arrived at the motel and slept in the strange bed. Despite the mayhem around me, I still hadn't quit my job. No matter what. Now that Tom couldn't find my hidden savings account, it became my only means of survival. I woke up with the first rays of daylight just penetrating the curtains, my decision-making burden from the previous night still weighing heavily on me. It all started today with taking back control. It seemed like I was living someone else's life when I scheduled a meeting with a divorce attorney, the notion of which was surreal. The lawyer's tiny office was filled with Mr. Henderson, a man who spared no effort. As I settled into my seat, he made the announcement. Let's get down to business. I raised my voice to declare my intention to initiate the divorce process. I am unable to return, I expressed. The complexities, joint accounts, properties, and the unraveling of our lives were thoroughly investigated by Mr. Henderson. He went into great depth to explain the legal process, my rights, and what was to come. As I readied myself to serve Tom with the divorce papers, I could feel the weight of my previous existence encased in the envelope. Returning to the apartment once shared with Tom, I found him still in slumber, likely drained from the fallout of the previous night. The ambience of the apartment seemed altered as I began gathering my belongings, each item carefully stowed away, marking the conclusion of another chapter shared. Upon completing my packing, Tom began to stir, stumbling into the kitchen with bleary eyes and evident confusion at the sight of my bags amassed by the door. "What's happening?" he mumbled, scratching his head in puzzlement. My response was not verbal, but rather a silent offering of an envelope. "These are for you," I stated flatly, my voice masking the turmoil within. With a mixture of disbelief and dissatisfaction, Tom tore open the envelope, his expression darkening as he perused its contents. "Divorce papers. Do you believe you can simply depart and all will be well?" he scoffed, his gaze icy as he looked up from the papers. "Return when contrition finds you, and perchance I might entertain the notion of reconciliation. But be forewarned. Henceforth you shall heed the counsel of my mother." The absurdity of his ultimatum nearly provoked laughter. Yet I restrained myself. "There will be no return, Tom. Our association, and all its trappings, concludes here." Exiting the apartment, the atmosphere outside felt altered, imbued with a sense of clarity and anticipation. Without hesitation, I proceeded toward a new destination, having rented a modest space just days prior. Finally, a sanctuary to call my own emerged, a sanctuary where I could commence the arduous task of rebuilding. Each step forward carried a weighty significance, yet felt undeniably right. Several weeks into settling in, I found myself back at the office, fully immersed once again in the whirlwind of publishing deadlines and author engagements. The presence of my colleagues, the rush of impending deadlines, it all rekindled a dormant spark within me, one I had feared lost. Days melted into weeks when I slipped seamlessly back into my familiar routine, deftly juggling manuscripts and deadlines with a newfound efficiency, spurred by recent personal upheavals. The return to this familiar landscape of texts and typos proved more comforting than I had dared imagine. Amidst this period of rediscovery, I reconnected with old friends. Individuals who had known me long before Tom entered the picture. Gatherings for drinks after work and shared meals on weekends became commonplace. And slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself once more. Laughter and light-hearted banter anchored me, allowing me to reclaim parts of myself long forgotten. Then, several months into this newfound phase of liberation, an unexpected call shattered the tranquility. It was Tom, his voice laden with awkwardness and desperation. "Hey. I've been laid off," he stammered, his words tumbling over one another. "Things are pretty rough. I was thinking, maybe you could help me out financially." His audacious request hung in the air, coupled with a suggestion of reconciliation and rebuilding. I couldn't help but burst out laughing in shock. After all we had gone through, his proposal was completely ridiculous. "Tom, after you've shown me the door, do you honestly think I would come back and support you and your parents? Whatever you did in the past is still on you, regardless of your current situation. Right now, I can't bear to give up my newfound independence, which is allowing me to thrive. I hope you're doing well. But our paths are going in different directions from here," I said with conviction, my words deciding our relationship's destiny. I felt a wave of strength wash over me as soon as the call ended. Even though Tom's call was ridiculous, it had confirmed something crucial: I was really free now. And no amount of money or pleading could change that. After watching the first story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, let's watch another similar story. From the moment Ava graced this world, adorned with azure eyes and a perpetually beaming countenance, it became unequivocally evident to all, particularly to our parents, that she could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, occupied the role of the other daughter, the one content with cast-offs and hand-me-downs. While Ava was showered with exclamations of needing the finest, I found myself handed mere remnants from bargain bins or books with well-worn pages. The discrepancy extended beyond material possessions. Ava effortlessly garnered the newest garments, gadgets, and undivided attention, basking in the adoration akin to that of royalty. Naturally, such treatment leaves an indelible mark, imbuing one with a sense of entitlement and adeptness in maneuvering through life's obstacles, even if it meant trampling over me. Ava wielded her influence with finesse, employing subtle manipulations and schemes, leaving me to grapple with the repercussions of her actions. Whether it was the clandestine disposal of Dad's cherished timepiece in my possession or her seamless charm that swayed even our extended family to her side, Ava crafted an image of innocence while I was relegated to the role of the troublemaker, the black sheep of the family. "Elise is just difficult," they would murmur in hushed tones, oblivious to my keen ears catching every syllable. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a refrain in our household, perpetuated by Mom's unwavering comparisons between Ava's ethereal presence and my more subdued demeanor. I vividly recall one afternoon bathed in sunlight, where Ava flaunted her latest acquisition, a garment from one of those illustrious brands that adorn storefronts. Prancing about as if the world were her stage. Glancing down at my own attire. Worn and faded from numerous cycles through the wash. I couldn't help but feel that all too familiar twinge of envy. "Isn't she just adorable?" Mom exclaimed. Her hands clapping together in delight. Her gaze fixed on Ava. Dad, perched on the couch, divided his attention between his newspaper and Ava. "Elise, could you do me a favor and fetch your sister's ballet shoes? She has her recital practice soon. And you know how important it is," Mom requested, her focus unwaveringly on Ava. I acquiesced with a nod, making my way to Ava's room, which dwarfed mine in size and overflowed with toys and gadgets that existed only in my dreams. When I sifted through the clutter to locate the elusive shoes, a single thought echoed in my mind. Why her? And not me? After I got back, I hurled the shoes at Ava's feet with a little more power than I had planned. She jumped to her feet, her innocent blue eyes big as a bug. "Elise, please be gentle. You should apologize to your sister," Dad said, his voice coming from behind his newspaper. "Ava," I whispered as my cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Grandma, Dad's mother, stood out as the lone compass amidst all this discord. Hard as nails. She would not be influenced by insignificant details. She would tell my dad. "Tom, you're fooling yourself if you think your girls are receiving equal treatment," in a tone that was both strong and caring. "Ava is deserving of all the affection and care that Elise receives." Both Mom and Dad would brush off her worries, and Grandma's insights would be written off as over the top by Mom. Even though Mom would say, "We treat them equally." The obvious advantages Ava had over me made her words seem hollow. Whenever we finished talking, Grandma would take a step back, her firm grasp on my hands belying her advanced years. "Listen, Elise," she would beg, her passion burning brightly in her eyes. "You must be courageous. They can't extinguish your brilliance. You are as intelligent and worthy as your sister." On most days, her remarks brought comfort. However, on graduation day, they seemed like the last straw that my parents would ever stand by me. I felt betrayed by their flat-out denial of helping with my education expenses. With a shrug, Dad made the comment, "We just don't think it's a good investment." As if my future were an uncertain stock option. My grandmother's willingness to pay for my college went above and beyond monetary aid when she stepped in at that point. When I escaped the poisonous environment of our house, it served as a guiding light, a beacon of hope. By declaring with an unfaltering voice, "You're going to do great things, Elise. And I want to see you get that chance." Grandma left no space for debate. It was like removing a layer of skin when I left home for college. Partially driven by a sincere curiosity and partially by the thrill of exerting a level of authority I had never known as a child, I decided to become a lawyer. At college, I found a haven where my troubles of the past could fade into the background. I didn't even bother to go back home when I graduated. Rather, I started a new chapter in my life as a lawyer after renting an apartment in the city. Our parents were utterly enchanted by her by the time my younger sister, Ava, stayed with them. The anecdotes that Grandma told, with whom they were in constant contact, vividly depicted the impact that Ava had on them, in a tone that was equal parts amusement and dismay. Grandma made the comment, "It's like watching a queen with her court." During one of our calls, my interactions with my parents were brief and tense, and they were the ones who would initiate conversations in order to brag about Ava's accomplishments or forthcoming activities. Mom would cheerfully remind us, "Don't forget, your sister's turning 20 next week." As if these reminders could somehow soften the increasing distance between us. At the same time, they ignored my birthdays, which hurt less and less as the years went by. I made a decision one night while sitting on my balcony and watched the city below be painted in serene hues by the setting sun. It was time to let go of the resentment and animosity, the never-ending comparisons to Ava. Even if I couldn't change what happened, I could control how it affected my future. I found a schedule that worked for me. Going to work, having happy hours with coworkers every once in a while, and spending peaceful weekends reading mystery novels. Afterwards, Nathan entered my office. Nathan had an air of natural charisma and assurance. A colleague had recommended him to help with a contentious business disagreement. As he took a seat across from me at my desk, he made the comment, "So, you're the miracle worker I've been hearing about." With a smile that was both charming and intimidating. To hide my weariness, I tried to laugh. My voice was heavy with resolve when I responded, "I'm not sure about miracles, but I'll definitely try my best to fix this for you." We got caught up in a flurry of legal maneuvers and late-night strategy discussions since the case turned out to be more complex than I had imagined. Nathan, in contrast to the majority of clients, expressed a genuine desire to grasp every detail, which resulted in extensive and regular meetings. One evening, after a particularly long session, Nathan stopped at the door as we were getting ready to leave the office. "Have you eaten yet, Elise? It's my fault for keeping you waiting. And I owe you dinner since I'm starving. Nearby, you'll find an adequate Italian joint." Who are you to speak? I was hesitant because I was not used to mixing my personal and business lives. Well, I see no reason not to. I mean, let's be clear. This is only a meal to say thank you. Very serious. Right? I asked. And he winked to show that he was aware of the unsaid tension between us and consented. While we were eating supper, Nathan showed me another side, one that was humorous and insightful, by telling me stories about his adventures and business endeavors. To my surprise, I felt more comfortable sharing personal details than I usually would with individuals I had only known for a short period of time. We felt a relief of clarity as we stepped out of the restaurant into the cool evening air. "Nate, I appreciate you making dinner. For a change. It was great to be away from the office." I confessed. My heartfelt admission. Happy it was enjoyable for you. And I was thinking, Elise, that maybe we might go out again after this whole issue is resolved. Just the two of us. No paperwork or disagreements. Nathan said. And I was taken aback by his candor. The idea had an irresistible charm, even if it caught me by surprise. Remarking to myself, "I'd like that." I was surprised by my own willingness to explore whatever this blossoming relationship could involve. The weeks that followed were a flurry of legal fights and intimate meals with Nathan. As we celebrated over cocktails, we felt a sense of professional and personal accomplishment from winning the case. Nathan, in an instant of kindness and friendship, extended his hand across the table to take mine. Here's to succeeding in court and, ideally, wooing attractive attorneys, he said with an air of light-hearted seduction. He looked directly at me as he lifted his drink. Watch out, counselor, I pointed out. You might find yourself accused of an overabundance of charm. Our modest party was perfectly capped off by his honest and loving laughs. As time went on, our business connection grew into something more intimate. After our first adventure together a year ago, I still felt perfectly at ease whenever I was with Nathan. So, it wasn't only the excitement of the occasion that made me fall head over heels when he proposed. It was a comforting feeling to know that I was with someone who valued and understood me. I responded affirmatively without thinking, and we agreed not to postpone. I called my folks to tell them the news, mixed with excitement and worry. The distance between us has grown wider over the years, and I was hoping this may help us get closer. But their response was, to put it mildly, indifferent. There was an obvious air of hostility the second I entered their home, despite their invitation to meet with me to go over wedding details. Although my parents were overjoyed, their words were empty because they held on to the outdated notion that Ava should be the first to tie the knot. And not because of her age, but because of her social standing. As the visit progressed, Ava unexpectedly unleashed her charisma. She begged, with an almost sanctimonious air, "Allow me to take care of your wedding arrangements." Elise, with a charming grin, "This is how I intend to express my desire for us to be on good terms with each other." My parents stepped in and encouraged me to accept her offer after I was taken aback and considered declining. I reluctantly consented, feeling a bit cornered. Ava reassured me that everything was going to be okay, and told me to concentrate on my work. I refrained from independently checking the details since her assurance was so compelling. But a sneaking suspicion made me look into the wedding plans when the big day approached. I was expecting a detailed explanation of the plans when I called the location. No. I got the curt, "We've reserved the room for you." But that's about it. The more questions I asked the florist, caterer, and decorator, the worse it got for me. There was a pattern. Ava would ask a few basic questions, then vanish without a trace, never to be heard from again. I would not allow her to ruin my wonderful day. Even though I was consumed by rage and betrayal, I needed to hear her lies for the last time. So I called her. "Hello, Ava. I wanted to see how you were doing. Is the plan still in motion?" I asked. "Oh, without a doubt. Hey, Elise. It's going to turn out gorgeous. There's no need to be anxious about anything," she chirped with an air of fake excitement. I contacted my friend Ella, who is an experienced wedding planner. The moment I hung off the phone, I had just 2 weeks to explain the Ava fiasco before a wedding that appeared to be nothing more than a booked location. Despite her disbelief, Ella wasted little time getting to work. "Elise, I will take care of it. Consider it done," she told me, her resolve inspiring confidence in me. Despite the underlying tensions, the wedding day went off without a hitch. Everything was perfect. The decorations, the music, and the revelry of our guests. I felt uneasy even though it was all I had imagined. Particularly when I saw Ava pouting and watching me from a corner. My mom grabbed the microphone midway through the reception, and her voice echoed throughout the hall. This lovely occasion would not have been conceivable without Ava. So please accept my sincere gratitude. Ladies and gentlemen. She made it clear that Elise should be extremely appreciative to her sister. As the audience erupted in applause. Ava, who wore a subtle expression of modesty on her face, was the target. The flagrant falsehood caused a wave of anger within me. I couldn't allow this lie to go unpunished today. My fists were clenched beneath the table. I got to my feet and used my voice to cut off the applause. I feel compelled to clarify something, I declared. Everyone in the room grew silent as they stared at me. Ava had nothing to do with planning this. Truthfully, she almost ruined the entire wedding, I declared, contrasting the merry atmosphere with the reality of the situation. Immersed in the moment, Ava started to sob uncontrollably, her tears coming out in a dramatic fashion. Do you get my point? I pointed out that she has always despised me and tried to bring me down. And the guests, taken aback, whispered amongst themselves and shook their heads in shock when I made my point. Ava, who played the part of the ideal victim, seemed to have their full support. As murmurs circulated in the room, I shot out. It's not slander if it's the truth. I felt alone and decided to stand my ground. When the tension rose, Ava's performance was further dramatized when she fled the hall. Still inconsolable, what was supposed to be a joyous occasion became a public display of marital strife as the mood deteriorated. The aftermath became considerably more severe in the weeks that followed. After Ava departed, she left a note in which she accused me directly of being the cause of her misery. Even people who had known us our entire lives became hostile toward me after reading this note. My folks took my word for it and blamed me for Ava being missing. No one was immune to Ava's machinations. Not even my grandma, who was always perceptive. She once exclaimed, "I can't believe you would push her to this." And the words sliced through like a scalpel. At that moment, she made it public that she was ending our relationship. Following the incident, I felt more and more alone as my loved ones took Ava's side, forcing me to face the brutal truth of being shunned by people I cared about. These things hung over our new life together like a cloud. Even though my marriage to Nathan was supposed to bring joy. As the months went by after our wedding, Nathan's business trips piled up like the stack of books on my nightstand, increasingly absent. Our once entertaining chats turned into courteous status posts. And our once fun times spent together seemed more like required check-ins. A credit card receipt for a high-end women's boutique, with a grand total of $2,000 worth of gowns and accessories, caught my eye one cold evening when I went through receipts and bills. My birthday had gone by without any presents, and our anniversary was still months away. So I was really confused. I chose to engage a private investigator, which felt intrusive but was essential, rather than confront Nathan. Carl, the rough-spoken detective, listened to my account with an uncommittal grunt. He asked with a gravelly voice, "I can look into it. But are you sure you want to know what I might find?" I made it clear that I was determined to find out. Carl called 2 weeks after that. He clarified, I have the results. Using a neutral tone of voice. Following the disastrous incident with Ava, which fractured our family, it had been some time since I last spoke to my grandma. Despite her deteriorating health, Grandma's intellect was as sharp as ever, and she had a profound and complex grasp of family dynamics. Bringing along the photographs and proof of Nathan's treachery, I paid her a visit. There were deeper lines of sadness around her eyes, and her smile was weaker than what I remembered when she welcomed me. Elise. It's been far too long, she whispered, her once strong voice barely audible. I understand, Grandma. I'm sorry, I said, settling down next to her feeble figure. There were a lot of unspoken things and unresolved issues that contributed to the growing distance between our encounters. I took a moment to gather the pictures and slipped them across the table to give her. Her expressionless face betrayed her examination of each one. Her eyes glistened with a blend of sorrow and empathy as she finally raised them to meet mine after a considerable delay. Oh, Elise, she moaned, her hand quivering as it came close to mine. We were all duped by your sister, weren't we? Anyone can do it. The impact of her remarks was devastating. The answer is yes. I also said that I believed Nathan had. Grandma drew me into a weak embrace, her body shaky but her hold strong. My deepest apologies. My love. I should have paid more attention. I should have observed. In what followed, many sobbed and laughed when they relived past hurts and cautiously touched new ones. Grandma passed dead a month afterwards. I approached the day of her will reading with a heavy heart because it was set at the office of our family lawyer. The space was filled with the customary energy that precedes major family gatherings as relatives flocked to the site. While some whispered their conversations, others engaged awkward small talk. My pulse was racing from the combination of the imminent will revelations and the obvious animosity in the room. So I sat down at the far end. Nathan, my spouse, sat down next to me. Although he was more of a bother than a help. The door swung open, and Ava strode in, shocking everyone. Her new, tougher, more deliberate image was immediately noticeable, and her sly grin as she walked in suggested that she was well aware of the impact her unexpected arrival had on everyone here. My parents, overcome with shock and excitement at first sight, hurried over to see her. Oh, Ava, you're back, my mom shouted, embracing Ava tightly. The air was heavy with emotion as Dad joined in. Her gaze quickly swept the room before settling on Nathan and myself, her expression exuding pure joy. She leaned in for a passionate kiss without hesitating as she walked over to him. Unfazed, Nathan passionately reciprocated the gesture, sending shockwaves through the room. With her smile now a planned veneer, Ava turned to address the room as she pulled away. Her startling declaration, "I orchestrated my disappearance," gave her listeners a thrill. Since she thought Elise had drove me away, her goal was to make sure Grandma would leave me everything. My parents looked at one another with doubt when they exchanged confused looks and mutters of astonishment at her announcement. Mr. Harley, the lawyer, cleared his throat to bring the focus back to the current issue. "If we may continue," he replied. And then he read the will, which Nathan and Ava were shocked to hear. And it left everything to me. As Ava voiced her disapproval, she betrayed her disbelief, saying, "This can't be right. Take another look." Mr. Harley kept his cool when he adjusted his spectacles. "There is no mistaking the will. Just now, your grandma finished her final revisions." I braced myself and spoke to the room with an unflinching tone. "Their affair has been on my radar for months. The place that Nathan often visits for business is actually where Ava has been residing. So she hasn't been hiding." I made sure everyone could view the evidence the detective had gathered. "Nathan, you betrayed me and attempted to manipulate Grandma." I told him without the agony that normally would have made my voice crack. Nathan tried to intervene, but I abruptly stopped him. He was clearly surrounded. "Nothing needs to be discussed. The betrayal has led me to seek a divorce and financial restitution. Elise. We're family." Ava tried to reassure Elise. "Of course we can." My voice was tinged with animosity as I interrupted. "You lost the privilege of calling yourself family when you chose to deceive and manipulate us all for your own gain." My parents' expressions transformed to ones of horror when they finally grasped the magnitude of the lie. Their faces had lost all color. My disdainful tone betrayed my suggestion that Ava seek out an experienced attorney. I turned to Nathan and said, "And you'll need one too." I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders when I left the lawyer's office. Free of the stress of the previous months, I felt like I was finally in charge of my life. Even though I knew the road ahead would be tough. In light of everything that had happened, I did what I thought was right as a woman and a lawyer. I was so determined that I divorced Nathan and sued him and Ava for the mental and emotional damage they caused via their lies. The indisputable proof obtained by the investigator ensured that the court proceedings went off without a hitch. After my marriage and the lawsuit came to an end with the final gavel strike, I felt a mixture of relief and emptiness. I cut all relations with Ava and Nathan after the divorce and litigation. My own parents eventually took Ava's side, making her seem like the victim and dismissing her schemes as innocent blunders. Their betrayal, which signaled an irreparable split in our paths, hurt nearly as much as the original dishonesty. Thankfully, there were friends and family members who were always there for Ava, and their behaviors showed how much they knew about her deceit and her true colors. Knowing that not everyone fell for her pretense was reassuring. The doorbell rang one night while I rearranged Grandma's old books on a living room shelf. When I opened it, I saw my Uncle Mike, who was one of the few family who had been there for me the whole time. "Elise, I wanted to see how you were doing," he remarked, looking about at the house and noticing the modifications I had made. "Excuse me, Uncle Mike. Please come in." He nodded his head in approval when I invited him into the living room. "The place is looking good under your watch. Reviving and full of life. Just like your grandma would have wanted it," he said. I felt a wave of comfort wash over me as he spoke, and a smile crept over my face. Truthfully, it has been healing. I admitted that being here and taking care of her home had helped me find some calm after everything. With a reassuring pat on the shoulder, Uncle Mike tried to ease my anxiety. "Elise, she would be so proud of you. You should fight for this house and for yourself. It's her ultimate wish for you." Later that night, after Uncle Mike left, I stood by the doorway and stared at the sunset. which was painting the horizon with vivid colors. Life still had its beautiful moments. No matter how bad things got. It was a stark reminder of that. Feeling secure in the house, I was prepared to face whatever obstacles came my way. Continuing the spirit of perseverance and strength that Grandma had inculcated in me. After watching the stories above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.